Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom and Influence podcast here at Cornerstone University. And I have a very, very special guest with us today, a friend of our university, Distinguished President's Fellow, Mr. Eric Metaxas. Eric, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been here for 2 full days. We've got you busy.
I like to be busy.
It's been a great busy.
It's good busy.
Yes.
It's great busy, yeah.
Thank you for being with us in chapel yesterday and even reading some of your new book, Revolution.
This was the first time I have ever done a public reading of my new book, Revolution, about the American Revolution, was yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's at first, and it happened here at Cornerstone University.
Yes.
So we're so grateful you were here and you did that, and it was wonderful. And I will tell you, I've heard nothing but great comments from people in chapel, all the members of the community, students, faculty, staff, and have learned a lot. And I think they've learned a lot. And I know you've learned a lot through doing this book.
Yes, I always do. When I write a book, I think people sort of assume maybe, oh, Eric's some scholar and he knows this stuff and now he's going to write a book about it. And that's not the case. Almost whenever I've written a book, I have an idea, but I don't know what I'm getting into exactly. And then as I get into it, I learn things. So when people first ask me about the new book called Revolution, about the American Revolution, they said, what's your angle? And I said, I don't have an angle. I just want to tell the story of the American Revolution because I think most of us don't know the whole story or forgot. And somebody needs to tell it in one book. It's a big book, but just tell the story. I didn't know that as I do the research to tell the story, stuff is going to come out and you're going to think, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I need to highlight that. That's dramatic, So there was a lot that I did learn in writing the book. But of course, now anybody who reads it will know what I know.
Well, we're here this year at Cornerstone celebrating the Super Centennial. And I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth telling the story one more time of how you came with Super Centennial. I think it's beautiful for our listeners to hear God working in your heart, God working outside of all those things, and why this is so important, Eric.
This is the kind of thing, you can't make this up. This is just nuts. It's crazy, right? About a year and a half ago, I was thinking, it's America's 250th anniversary. I wonder what that's called. And, you look it up, and it's called the semi-quincentennial. Now, I remember the bicentennial, and it was exciting. Everybody's going nuts. It's the bicentennial. We have Bicentennial Minute on CBS, and there's bicentennial this, bicentennial hats and T-shirts and bicentennial. We're celebrating our bicentennial. And I thought, I wish we had something like that. Nobody's going to say, hey, have you heard? It's our semi-quincentennial, And I came up with the idea that we should call it the supercentennial, that just by fiat, like we're naming it the Gulf of America, we just declare it's the supercentennial. 250 is the supercentennial. And when I got the idea, and again, if people know me, they know I'm not making this up, I really believe God gave me the idea for President Trump. Now, I can't prove that. So I said, well, if it really is God's idea, and if he wants it to get to President Trump, then God has to open the door for me to share it with President Trump, and President Trump has to like it. I can't make that happen. I mean, I know I can't make that happen. So long story short, back in, I don't know, I think it was September, I find myself in the room with President Trump. I share the idea with him, which was itself astonishing because I don't hang out with the president. And I got to share this idea with him. 20 minutes later, he's giving a speech to Fox News in front of the Religious Liberty Commission, and he refers to me, Eric's on the commission, blah, 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 blah. And Eric wants to call the 250th the supercentennial. He declares it. And I looked at my daughter, I thought, are we dreaming this? Like, is the president 20 minutes ago, I shared this idea with him off the top of my head. Here's an idea. He shares it publicly. And he goes, and I think we're going to do that. We're going to call it the supercentennial. And he goes, to all my staff in the room, you're around here, we're going to make that change. We're calling it the supercentennial. I said, this is a miracle. Yeah. This is a miracle. I didn't twist his arm. I didn't even know I'd get to share this with him. So, yes, where people are calling it the supercentennial, I think it's celebratory. It ought to be celebratory.
Super.
Right? Because semi-quincentennial kind of sounds, it's so nerdy that nobody's going to remember it. Yep. But to say this is I was alive for America's supercentennial, the 250th, and I really think this year is going to be a big deal. Yeah. This is a year where we celebrate our founding. Obviously, my book is coming out as part of that, but it is vital that we know who we are, why America came into being, if we understand that, it really changes how we view a lot. And these things have not been taught in our lifetimes. Yeah. I mean, it's been hugely neglected. I mean, scandalously neglected. And if you don't teach this, and if you don't have Americans who understand this, you lose America. Yeah. Because America is an idea, and if we don't get that idea and buy into that idea and live into that idea, it goes away. And so I think this year, this super centennial year, is an opportunity for us to refocus on our history, on the heroes of our history. And so obviously a lot of that's in my book, but I think it's going to be unavoidable wherever you look. It's going to be great.
Well, Eric, before we continue, I want to say thank you. On behalf of the university and our board and everyone, thank you for all that you do and all the writing and speaking to bring this to the forefront. I just want to say thank you. I was so blessed yesterday being in chapel. And I sat there thinking, as you were speaking about Whitefield and the revival and just the profound influence of Christ in the gospel in our founding, I thought, Lord, thank you that all the students at Cornerstone and faculty and staff could hear this in chapel. So thank you, Eric, for all that you're doing.
Well, listen, I know that this is the assignment the Lord's given me, and it's my privilege to be able to do this. It's what a great joy to be doing something that actually matters, you know.
You said something yesterday, one of our settings that I've been thinking about. It's not just having a Christian worldview. It's also doing it and living it out.
Well, this is the heresy
Talk
of
to
our
us
time.
about that. That's powerful stuff.
This is the heresy of our time, and I don't use the word heresy lightly. It's a big deal. I mean, listen, Bonhoeffer wrote about this. Most people, if they know me, they know I wrote a biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, what was Bonhoeffer screaming about to the German churches of his day? He was saying to the German churches of his day, you need to live out your faith. It doesn't matter what's in your head. God doesn't care what's in your head. Are you living it out? He sees your heart. He sees if you say you believe it, but you don't believe it. He knows whether you really believe it. And if you really believe it, you're going to live it out. And he saw that this idea, the good idea that, we're saved by faith. That's Luther. Great. What does that mean? It means you're saved by faith, but it doesn't mean that you're done. If you actually are saved by faith, you're going to live out your faith in works. And so a lot of evangelicals, they immediately leap to all works is works righteousness. It's like, that's garbage. The scripture is clear. You're supposed to live out your faith. God has prepared works for us to do. He doesn't translate us to heaven the minute we get saved. He has work for us to do, and he expects us to do it. And so this idea, which has really infected the evangelical church, is that, it's all about your theology, what you say you believe. And you think, no, you've got to live it out. You can claim. We just had a scandal with Philip Yancey, who said that he betrayed, for 8 years, he betrayed everything he believed about marriage. And I thought, first of all, I want to have grace for everybody, but I thought to myself, what you just said is not true. You obviously didn't believe this about marriage because you can't betray it for 8 years straight. You clearly, in your heart of hearts, didn't believe it. You somehow, and so we often talk about, I believe this, but if you believe it, this doesn't mean you can't make mistakes, but if you believe something, you're going to live it out. It's going to be obvious in how you live. And that idea has been so denigrated over time. I mean, imagine Bonhoeffer, this is almost a century ago, was preaching to the German church, you need to live out your faith. You keep talking about grace, but this is cheap grace. If you really believe in the idea of grace, you're going to take it seriously. You're going to live self-sacrificially. And that has really, really weakened the American church to the point that people think, I don't need to do anything because I'm saved. And you think, if you're saved, you're gonna live your whole life to glorify God in every way, and it's going to be self-sacrificial, and that's the joy. That's what God has called you to do, And so it really is dramatic to me to think that people think, I believe all the right stuff, or I have a biblical worldview. Okay, great, but there's more. Now you have to live it out. And so that's where it gets into, Bonhoeffer used the term faith in action. You've got to put your faith in action. Otherwise, why would you even claim to have faith? What is your faith? It's some intellectual construct that you pretend that it's so important, but you need to live it out. If it's so important, it'll affect how you live. So
you've touched on this yesterday and even just now, and as we think about America's super centennial, this amazing opportunity we have to celebrate, to remind ourselves, correct ourselves. Talk with us about the role of the church today, and especially. I've talked with this with my colleagues. It's disappointing. So many churches you attend or you visit, where oftentimes the pastor will say, "I'm not going to talk about politics today," and there are some burning questions and some burning issues, but they put it under this thing called politics, so we can't talk about it. But you have to talk about these significant issues. How does a church shift? How do pastors shift so that people in the pew are having real, meaningful, gospel-centered conversations about what they should be doing, not just thinking?
Well, think about what they're doing. In other words, you're supposed to be discipling your flock to think Christianly and to live Christianly. So when people say, like, oh, we just preach the Bible, we don't do politics, that is a lie. That is a lie. You're not preaching the Bible. If you're preaching the Bible, you're preaching courage in action. You're preaching. I mean, imagine you're in a place where you're in Nigeria. You're in a place where you can lose your life, literally, because of your faith. We need to be preaching heroic faith that lives itself out. So when you go to a church, I mean, only in America, we're so lazy and spoiled that we think, my faith isn't going to cost me anything. It's just, I got this happy thing with Jesus, and it's not going to. And you think, that's not biblical. And so here you have a pastor pretending. I mean, listen, in the 1850s, there were pastors that said, like, you know what? We just preach the happy gospel. We don't talk about slavery. If you're not taking a stand on the moral issue of slavery, you're a coward. And worse than coward, you are using religious excuses to be a coward. That's what the Germans did in the 1930s. They said, we're not going to speak against the Nazi party, or we don't do politics here. And today you have pastors saying, well, I'm not going to talk about whether the election was stolen or whether we weren't even going to get into any of that. We don't touch politics and you think, we're supposed to care about corruption. We're supposed to care about truth. We're supposed to care, and it affects how I vote. If I vote for that person or I don't vote, wicked policies will be enacted which will affect human beings that the Lord has commanded me to love. And so if I do nothing, I don't vote, I don't even care was the election honest, if I get away from all that stuff, because I pretend like, well, I'm just doing the Christian thing. I'm not talking about that. You're misunderstanding the whole Christian project. God calls us to bless the world. You bless the world. If you live in a free country and people have died so that you can vote and so you can have a voice. When you see something wrong, you speak up, whatever. If you live in a free country like that and you don't use your voice, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. You're pretending that you have this religious carve-out. You're pretending like, well, I'm going to sit on the fence. I don't want to take sides. It's no different saying I don't want to take sides on the slavery issue. That today we would say that's cowardice. That's despicable. You had the ability to influence people on one of the most important moral issues of the day. Today there are many of these kinds of issues, the trans lunacy, killing babies in the womb. You have an obligation in a loving way to share this with your flock and to let them know this is Christianity, is living out God's mandate. It was Christians who abolished the slave trade. It was Christians who led that battle. I mean, it was Christians who rebelled against King George and said, we will not, bow the knee to these things. We think these things are wrong. We're going to stand up to it. We have an obligation to do that. So if you're going to a church that pretends that they don't need to get involved in this stuff, I always say to people, get out of that church. I mean, it's what led me to write my book, Letter to the American Church, because I thought there's so many people that I know, they sort of think this is okay to turn aside from these issues. Children were being mutilated. Babies are being killed in the womb. There's all kinds of things happening, and you're saying, well, it doesn't concern me. And it's like saying, well, maybe I don't believe in slavery, but I'm not going to talk about that publicly. If you don't say anything about that, God will hold you accountable for being silent when this is happening. And so there's this lie that we're not supposed to be political has really, really dramatically infiltrated the church, so that if you want to know why things are as bad as they are in America, it is because of that theology, which is heretical. It's wrong. It's not biblical theology, but it has really infected the American church, just as it infected the German church in the run-up to Hitler. It's devastating. When the church is not the church, it devastates the culture.
And one of the things, when I hear pastors or anyone speak about, it's political, so I'm not going to speak about it, it's almost as if they're saying, we can't really know what's right or wrong here. Right?
That's what they are saying.
So we're not going to talk about
They're
it. And
sending
I think,
the
how
message.
can you as a Christian say such a thing? How can Christian University say this? So a few months back, a Christian university out west banned pro-life student groups on campus because they said the pro-life issue is a political issue. A Christian university.
Yeah.
How can you say that? So doubt, skepticism has become so fashionable, not just in universities or Christian universities, in churches.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked by that when I think Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and the clarity that we're given.
I tell people to run from those churches, and I have said publicly many, many times, if you're going to a church like that, you're tithing God's money to a church like that, you're guilty. And you need to be aware, God is not fooled by the fig leaf of your claims or whatever. He sees how you live, he sees what you do, and you have a responsibility that there are people whose lives will be affected. I mean, it's one thing to say this in 1975 or even 1985, to say like, well, both parties, blah, blah, blah. You could say that, and it was not really all that wrong. I mean, if you vote for, Bob Dole, if you vote for, the point is that over time, it has gotten worse and worse and worse. So you're now dealing with open cultural Marxism, which is anti-God. It's not pro-God, but different on some issues. It is anti-God. It's a secular, anti-American, anti-biblical worldview that the left has adopted and has taken over the Democratic Party. And so if you don't know that, then you ask, well, what's the difference? The difference is very dramatic. And of course, this is not to say that the Republicans are great. Many Republicans are part of the problem. But the point is that you have to care about who we elect for president. What judges will they appoint? Who will be in their cabinet? Who will have a voice? What we saw under the last administration was devastating to people of faith, to pro-life people. And how many Christians said, I'm not going to vote, or it doesn't matter? Shame on you. It matters. It matters. It matters dramatically. And, if you're going to a church, as I say, that pretends that it doesn't matter, that would be no different than going to a church in 1850 that says, the slavery issue, it's not a gospel issue. And you say that's not a gospel issue? What gospel are you preaching? Or in Germany, that we're not going to speak against the Nazis. Are you aware of what the Nazis did? Are you aware of what the Nazis did because the churches didn't stand up to this? Are you aware of that? So, it's why I wrote my book, Letter to the American Church, but it's something that I'll probably never cease talking about, because there's always this kind of lie that's so tempting to say, oh yeah, I can just be neutral. You can't be neutral.
One of these amazing declarations from our President Trump, was that in May, there will be a massive prayer event to rededicate the nation to God. And I thought, this is incredible.
You're saying Kamala Harris wouldn't have done that? Oh, come on.
It
Really?
thrilled me to no end to see that, because as you've spoken about, and please share with us, with your book, Revolution, the incredible grounding of God in the scriptures for this country. And to have the president now say that and call on the whole nation, whether people like it or not, just that proclamation, I think it's so powerful.
No, and I'm going to be there, and I'll probably be involved. And I have to say that when I heard that, I was astonished. I thought, this is what we voted for. And because to rededicate the nation to God, our nation was dedicated to God. The founders put out proclamation after proclamation. The Continental Congress, starting in 1774, over and over through the war, they put out one proclamation after the other, proclaiming a day of fasting and praying. They basically said, if we're not on God's side, we don't want to win. We want to be on God's side. We want the Lord to be with us. We want to humble ourselves. We don't want to do this if this is not God's idea. And they said it over and over. It was a covenant theology that we're looking to the Lord directly. And that is who we are as a nation. It is what has made us thrive as a nation, our fidelity to God, or at least our desire to be faithful to God. And so the fact that this president has declared that for May 17th, I thought it's amazing because in a way that's the subtext of my book, Revolution, is that this is what made America come into being. And now, 250 years later, we are rededicating the nation to God. And I didn't plan this, but May 17th is the day that my book comes out. That's the exact day that my book comes out. So I'll be in D.C. launching my book in one way or another on that day, and then probably being on the National Mall. But this is a sacred prophetic act.
It is.
For a president to declare we're rededicating the nation to God. Things will happen as a result of this. This is a major thing. It happens in the spiritual realm. When you make a declaration like this, God hears this. God sees and hears this.
Yeah. You said something yesterday. I've been thinking since you said it, and it was beautiful. Oftentimes you in chapel and in a follow-up event about the things you've discovered in your book as you wrote your book, and you said these are facts. These are facts. Yeah. These are facts. So I'm mindful of that Enlightenment thinker called Voltaire, who said history is a bag of tricks you play on the dead. And how many academic historians have perhaps led us down this dark path of saying that these are the wrong things about the revolution, right? It wasn't Christian. God was not at the center. It's stuff that we've made up. You've uncovered a treasure trove of material that say, no, you're wrong. These are actual facts.
Oh, no, it's funny because the late, great Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York, I have the privilege of meeting him, and I know his daughter. He once famously said, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Facts are facts, right? And John Adams, in his defense of the soldiers in the Boston Massacre, he said, facts are, now I'm going to forget it, this is the great quote that I can't remember, facts are stubborn things, I think he said. But the point is, you have to be based in reality. And it doesn't matter what you like or don't like. The question is, what are the facts? And then you can decide what the facts are. But there are people who simply don't like the idea that God is central to our founding, that God is central to the American project. They just don't like that. So what do? They pretend like, oh, well, it was the Enlightenment. I've now done the research. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, it was not the Enlightenment. It was Christian faith. It was Puritan Reformation-based faith that led, in the run-up especially to the Revolution in Boston. That was all Reformation, Puritan theology. There was a famous preacher in Boston, Jonathan Mayhew, who preached a sermon in 1750, just like what we were talking about 10 minutes ago, rebuking this idea of Romans 13 means we don't need to stand against wicked government, that we go, whatever the government says, we go along with it. In 1750, he preached a sermon on this issue, saying that if the government is telling you to do the wrong thing, you have an obligation to dissent, to resist. Our fidelity is to God alone. And that sermon, John Adams said, was read by everyone. It was published and it was read by everyone. So that's 1750. So by the time you get to the 1760s and the Stamp Act and all of this stuff, the Bostonians were steeped in what does it mean to be a Christian? How does that affect my view of politics, my view of the king, my view of my role as a subject? They understood all of this stuff, and so this is the base of it, and it's almost endless that culture was so dramatically Christian that even those who weren't that Christian were Christian. That's not escapable. Those are the facts, and I mean my book is not about that, but it's just inescapable. When you read the story, you think, how come I didn't learn this in school? This is very interesting. I had no idea that this was the case. And I wrote about it in my book, If You Can Keep It, which is a much shorter book than my Revolution book. But it's simply not avoidable. So if you don't like it, that's one thing. But let's look at the facts, that it was Christian faith that led to the creation of the United States of America. It was Christian faith that led to the abolition of slavery. Those are just facts. Now, if you don't like it, talk. But to pretend that it was an Enlightenment project, no, it was not an Enlightenment project. The Enlightenment thinkers were involved, but and then related to this, you constantly hear, and this is now I realize nonsense, that the founders were all deists.
Right.
Nonsense.
Yes. Or secret Freemasons or something.
Well, no, they may have been. That's it's in some ways that part is complicated. But the idea that they were deists is nonsense. George Washington, over and over and over again, does not write or speak like a deist at all. In fact, he was involved in the 1760s in Virginia on a commission to push deism out. He was actually on this commission. But when you hear him talk, I mean, in his first inaugural, I think more than a third of the entire speech is talking about God. I mean, it's startling. And he talks about a God who operates in history, who sees what we do and responds to what we do. That's not a deist clockmaker God. And there are innumerable cases of this. So when people say that, they're basically lying. That they were all deists. That's simply not true. But you have respected historians, even like Joseph Ellis, who says, well, Washington was not a typical Christian. He was a deist. And you hear Ken Burns, This is simply not true. And again, if I hadn't now done the research, I would say, well, I guess it's complicated. That's not complicated. That part is not complicated. Washington was a very serious Christian. Martha Washington and George Washington's mother were very serious Christians. It's just not deniable. And the idea that people keep doing that, keep pretending that, Thomas Jefferson was central in independence. He actually was very peripheral to our independence. He was tasked with writing the words to the Declaration of Independence, but most of that was, it's kind of like they gave him everything to write, and then he put it in his own words. And Adams forced him to do the first draft because he said, "I know that he will, he's capable of some wonderful felicity of phrasing or something like that. That the way he writes, he'll put it in a way, which of course he did." But the idea that Jefferson, because he wrote that draft, was responsible for independence or one of the main thinkers behind, that's simply not true. And I think we have to give the credit where it's due, mostly to John Adams in that case. But there are people that they just, they say, I don't like that Christian stuff, so we're gonna focus on Jefferson as though,
the only one, right.
And he was virtually uninvolved in, anyway, it's just facts are facts, and you have to be honest. So
Eric, you mentioned yesterday something about frailty. If you can keep it, in some way speaks about, we'll see if you can do this, but it also speaks about the frailty of a country. And you also spoke yesterday about the incredible moral character of George Washington. And I thought we can talk about the frailty of human character, the frailty of the national character. I'm mindful of Proverbs chapter 4, where the writer tells us, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. How frail we are as people, how frail a new country is. As you think about the supercentennial, what would you want our listeners to know about the frailty of the national character and what we need to do to keep it with all diligence?
Well, I'll state it dramatically to begin with. We all deserve to live as slaves. God in his mercy has given us the ability to govern ourselves and to be free. And that comes with a price, but it's God's will that we pay that price and that we live as free citizens governed by God, governing ourselves, looking to God. The founders were really reestablishing the Sinai covenant. They wanted to go back to a time when people were not governed by a king, but they looked directly to God. So that's the Sinai covenant, 1400 BC. I mean, it's unbelievable. And that idea goes away effectively forever until 1776. You don't really get people governing themselves. And it's amazing to me that is just the normal way that human beings exist is not to be free. To be free, you need God. You need people who look to God and who are willing to govern themselves and pay the price of what does it mean to be free and to govern ourselves. That is fragile. It is rare. and we don't deserve it. But God says, but if you want it, it's my will that you have it. But you have to live it. You have to pay that price. And the fragility of it, I mean, it's become really clear in the last 50 years that we've been drifting in this secular direction. And of course, if you drift in a secular direction, government just gets bigger and bigger because government begins to replace God because you're not looking to God, so you're going to have to look to government. That's the short way of putting it. And that's been happening so that suddenly in just the last few years, we've seen astonishingly crazy things that you thought could never happen in America. And that takes decades to creep in. And only because it's gotten this bad that have a lot of people woken up and said, wait a minute. I'm reality-based. I don't think a man can become a woman, and I don't care what you say. We all know that a man can't become a woman. Woman can be. You're telling me now I have to accept this, to be accepted socially or culturally. I have to spout these things that I know are not true. I mean, that's one example. Yeah. Or I have to suddenly start saying that, well, socialism's not so bad or communism is – have we forgotten the basics? I mean, this is basic stuff. Anybody whose family comes from a communist world, talking to you, you're talking to me, we know. Yeah. Okay? Anybody who's come from that world thinks, are you kidding me? Yeah. I would do anything to avoid that. My mother escaped East Germany, which was taken over by this Stalin, right? East Germany, she was 17 years old. I talk to her every day. She's 91 years old. She escaped as a 17-year-old because it was unbearable. Mm-hmm. And most of our relatives stayed behind, and they lived under that until 1991. Right. They lived under that oppressive, horrible, cynical system. And so cynical people like Voltaire, these are cynical people who, their life is okay, so they don't really care, right. And they can make these cynical statements. But people would do anything to live free. And, we're only living at a time now where I think a lot of people have woken up. Things got so bad that they said, okay, I guess I need to pay attention. Because of COVID, I saw what my kids were learning in school, and I thought, are you kidding me? I wasn't paying attention to this, and I'm hearing this lunacy. I need to homeschool them, or I need to get them. A lot of people have been waking up. So great things are happening. I think because things got so bad that some people finally woke up.
Yeah, and it's my hope, and I know yours as well, that this year people really, really wake up. You think about Tim Kaine, what he said, right? Listen, or you think about the politicians speaking about the warm embrace of socialism.
Okay, Tim Kaine. For people, a lot of people listening to this, they have blissfully forgotten who's Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine was chosen by Hillary Clinton as her running mate in 2016, and he recently said, this is a United States senator who was recently mocking Ted Cruz and saying, oh, you think our rights come from God? And you almost think that's like somebody saying, oh, you think 1 + 1 = 2?
And he accuses us of being like Iran.
And I thought, well, but that's the point. It's like these people don't have the beginning of an understanding of America and liberty. And of course our rights come from God. Have you ever heard of John Locke? You're a U.S. senator. You don't understand that our rights come from God. That's why they're sacred and inalienable. It's in an obscure document called the Declaration of Independence. Has Tim Kaine read that? Like the fact that we have U.S. senators, not just that ignorant, but publicly proclaiming their ignorance of the most basic facts. Then they can't tell the difference between free America and a theocracy like Iran, or a theocracy like North Korea, where you're told if you believe, you'll be imprisoned. That's a different type of theocracy. It's an atheist theocracy, right? It's an atheocracy. It is evil, and we are free. And in America, people have religious liberty. But people like Tim Kaine, they're not interested. But this is for the whole world of leftists. They think they understand this, but every now and again, when they speak, you realize that they don't have the beginning of a clue of what everybody used to know. I mean, any Democrat, in 1960 knew all this stuff. Yeah. We all were on the same page, and we are now living in a day where the level of ignorance actually it's frightening because if enough people don't know this, you lose the country, which is why we've almost lost the country.
One of the beautiful things about this year as well, and our Super Centennial, is the opportunity we have to speak about American exceptionalism. the grandeur of America. And I love the fact that your book is not the American Revolution. You mentioned this tidbit yesterday, which I thought was wonderful, just revolution.
Yeah.
And you spoke so eloquently about how exceptional the revolution was, how exceptional the country is. So would you share with our listeners just a tidbit of that, of the exceptionalism of our founding, of our beginning, of our principles of who we are now, so that we don't forget, we remind ourselves this year and moving forward.
Well, I say in the introduction to my book, which I read yesterday publicly here at Cornerstone, I state that our way of governing that began in 1776 is unlike anything in the history of the world. That's a fact. And so when people talk about, the American Revolution or the French Revolution, you think, wait a minute. There's only been one real revolution. That's the American Revolution. That's the revolution. The French Revolution is a dark joke. It was a secular, misguided, a lot of good people got sucked into thinking like, we can have freedom without God. Actually, you can't. And actually, they didn't. They didn't succeed. Or the Bolshevik Soviet Revolution, which is a demonic parody of a revolution. It is wickedness, purporting to be for the people, but then crushing the people. So our revolution is the only real revolution in human history, political revolution. And it comes out of the Enlightenment, which was another kind of revolution. This is not deniable. This is just, these are the facts. Now, it doesn't mean that Catholics or Muslims or atheists or whatever, can flourish in America. But the ideology was a Reformation, Puritan ideology that led to our founding. And in terms of exceptionalism, you always have to say, when we refer to American exceptionalism, we don't mean Americans are exceptional. Americans are the same as anybody. We're all human beings, sinners. But the ideas of America that we have the privilege to live under, we don't deserve it. We get this gift that we get to live in a government where we can govern ourselves. That is an exceptional idea in the history of the world. And I think we've all been led to believe, like, well, we're not so special. There are other wonderful countries that, and you think, well, first of all, we have led the way in this, and then all of these other countries that sort of have what we have don't have what we have. They when push comes to shove, you say the wrong thing in England today, you say the wrong thing in Germany, you can go to jail for saying the wrong thing. How's that different from China? I mean, you do not have freedom. You don't have freedom of speech. J.D. Vance gave a beautiful speech, a year and a half ago in Munich. He lays this out to our so-called NATO allies and says, like, we used to be on the same page after the war, but you have drifted dramatically. And how can we be allies completely with people that are, we're going to be allies with people with whom we disagree. But let's stop pretending we're all on the same page when it comes to liberty. And what's going on in Europe right now is utterly scandalous. It is secular. The EU constitution is totally secular. What a joke that is. How do you even define Europe apart from Christendom? Christendom was Europe. Europe was Christendom. And they have drifted so far in the secular direction that in many ways, we're not their ideological allies anymore. We wish they would come back, but they have really lost their way. And so American exceptionalism simply means that we have a system of government which is beautiful and true and real. And the first president not to say that we're exceptional was Barack Obama. He says, I think we're exceptional. And again, what's embarrassing to me, it shows his ignorance, that he doesn't even understand what American exceptionalism is. He thinks American exceptionalism is, we're awesome.
Right.
No. American exceptionalism, means that we have a system of government that no one else has around the world. We wish everyone would have it. It's not, we didn't patent it. We're not going to charge you money to be free. But we're the only country that has had it in the way that we've had it. And he said something like, we think we're exceptionalism, just like the Greeks think they're exceptional. And you think, you're missing the point. We're not talking about national pride. We should be proud to be Americans, just as Greeks should be proud to be Greek. And I'm proud to be the descendant of Greek. We have that kind of pride, which is healthy and beautiful. But American exceptionalism is something else. Here we're talking about facts. This is not just like, we're the guys that love vanilla ice cream. No, this is something that people have died for this way of governing ourselves. And because of that, America didn't just come into being, but it has flourished dramatically. We put the man the 12 men on the moon and brought them home. We have done things in history that the whole world is looking at us. Just like John Winthrop, in 1630, he says we want to be like a city set on a hill. He's quoting Jesus. We want everybody to look at us and say, whatever they have, right, we want that. What is that? And he knew, John Winthrop did, that if people looked to what they had in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the answer would be robust Christian faith. We have Christian faith here, and that's why we're flourishing, and that's what's beautiful. And that's basically what happened in the United States of America. When we became a country, over time, more and more people look at us and they go, what do they have? That's amazing there. I want to go there. Can I go there? Mm-hmm. My parents said, can I go there? They were able to come here and become citizens. And why? Because we have something beautiful, but it is incumbent on us to understand what that is, and to do everything we can to make sure that it lives on. And so I really do believe that this supercentennial year is like a reset for America, and that President Trump's declaration that on May 17th we're going to rededicate the nation to God. There's something very special happening. This is not just a political decision. That this is it's a God thing.
Eric, thank you for being here. Thank you for all you do for the Lord, for our country, and thank you for being a part of Cornerstone. We greatly appreciate it, Eric. Thank you so much.
My privilege. Thank you.